Good morning, everybody. It's just after 9:30 on Tuesday, so I thought we'd get started. Today we've got Nina and Ilana from Google who are going to give us a little talk on Google Analytics. Hopefully it should be entertaining for you. Would you like to introduce yourselves, ladies, please?
Hi. Hey. So welcome to the Google Analytics for Nonprofits webinar. My name is Nina and this is Elena. We're co-hosting today. We've been working at Google for a little over 5 years, and we both use our 20% time to help nonprofits get the most out of Google products. So that put us in touch with the Neil Squire Society and also brought us to your webinar today.
Thank you very much. Well, I'll let you get started, okay?
Great, so we will get started, and we are going to turn off the video. This is the last time you'll see us, probably, so maybe the very end, so we don't use extra bandwidth on video. So we're going to turn that off, but we will get started.
Yeah, for the people who are attending, we've got Kathleen in the room just now who's going to be monitoring our chat window. If you do have any questions of any sort during the course of the session, what we can do is we can actually put the questions in the chat, then we can ask them towards the end of the session. Hopefully we'll be able to answer the questions there and then. If not, then we can try and get back to you later on if the questions are a bit complicated. Okay, thanks so much.
Okay, great. So welcome to our Google for Nonprofits webinar, like we said. Our presentation today is focused on helping you and your organization identify how Google Analytics can help you reach your goals. And just as a little housekeeping, Chad sent out a worksheet packet earlier, I believe maybe earlier this week or last week. And if you haven't had a chance to print it out, you can always do that later, but we will be referencing it throughout the training. There's a KPI worksheet or a key performance indicators worksheet. There's also a behavior and goals worksheet, a social worksheet, and a mobile worksheet. We'll be demoing a lot of those sections today, and you really don't need to try to fill it out and follow along. Feel free to just follow along with the demo, and you can always fill it out in your own time as the worksheets are pretty straightforward. We'll also make the deck available after the training, so don't worry about kind of taking furious notes and screenshots because you will have these materials after. Okay, great. So this is the agenda that we'll be going through today. We're going to talk a little bit about the background of Google Analytics and how we got to the robust program that we have today. We'll also go through the types of reports available to you in Google Analytics. So hopefully you can figure out which reports you're interested in digging into a little bit more. And you can also figure out which reports might not be as interesting or as useful to you guys, so you don't have to keep considering kind of the full suite of reports as something that you should know. Will really kind of help you focus in on what's useful for you guys. And we're also going to sign into the account at that point and get a little bit of hands-on practice in the account. And again, once we do those worksheets, feel free to just follow along with the demos or fill them out yourself if you feel comfortable with doing that as well. Okay, great. So let's jump right in. So just the brief history of web analytics, quickly recapping how we got to where we are today. The early websites had, I don't know if you remember, but hit counters, which would just tally up the number of users who visited the site. And from this kind of very simple tally, how many people have visited my website full of cat cartoons, the entire business of web analytics actually evolved. And from simply counting the number of page hits, analytics programs began to measure entire user visits in the form of sessions and provide statistics in ratios instead of counts. So something like 30% of people are reading cat cartoons on a mobile device might give you a better picture of what's happening on your website than just raw numbers. Analytics programs today, including Google Analytics, they also take it one step further, and they can give you the ability to determine the importance of certain visits. So we recognize that not all visits are created equal. Some end up bringing a lot of value to your organization, and some do not. So not only can we measure for those, but we can start to optimize your marketing efforts to bring more of those meaningful visits to your site. And as we work in the accounts today, I would urge you not to get too hung up on why some reports might be slightly different than other reports or show slightly different data or percentages or numbers. Instead, we might want to draw some guidance from this little quote here. It's more important to reach the people who count than to count the people you reach. So please do keep in mind that we shouldn't really agonize over the data itself. As long as we think we're getting good data and we do have the code installed and all of kind of those basic requirements in that, we can then just focus on really like what you can learn from those measurements and how those can be valuable to you. Okay, so Elena is going to take us through the ABCs of analytics.
All right, yes, so ABC, it's really starting with the basics here. I'm really talking about the left-hand menu. So if you've ever opened up Google Analytics, you've probably just kind of poked around. You've probably seen, kind of a left sidebar with a bunch of different options. So we'll just give you a quick way to just kind of remember, in general, what those things are. All right, so this is the left sidebar on the left. And the reports that we'll mostly be talking about are these 4 that we've highlighted here. So audience, acquisition, behavior, and conversions. And an easier way to think about that is really the who, where, what, and the money tab. So the audience, that one's pretty clear. It's the type of people visiting your site, which actually we'll dive into here. Type of people on your site, where they live, what countries, some basic demographic information like gender and age, but also really important things like the technology they're on, which, depending on your audience, that might be a really important thing to consider as you are working on your website. If a lot of people are on mobile, you need to make sure that your site is, for example, mobile optimized. If people are on older devices, you might need to take that into account and maybe not do the craziest, fanciest thing in your site. So a lot of good insights here about just the type of people visiting your site, and you can make sure that those people really match the people that your nonprofit is trying to reach. All right, acquisitions. This is really about the traffic to your site. So, and mostly how you're getting them, which is a really important thing to understand, since how people get to your site is really kind of a signal of what they might be trying to do on your site. For example, are they, Google searching your name directly? Do they already know about you? Are they coming from your social sites, which might point to a really effective social campaign that you're running? Are you using AdWords? So is your AdWords account actually driving traffic to your site? This is a really important signal. I would just definitely recommend diving into this a lot. All right, then the next one is behavior reports. So this is the what. So what are people doing on your pages? So which pages of your site are they going to? When do they leave? Which is a good question. So which pages did they come to and just leave? And how much time are they spending on your sites? And the last one we will dive into a lot more towards the end, which is conversion reports. And we call this one the money tab, since for a lot of websites, they might be selling something, so this report really tells them how much money they're making from their site. But for us, we can kind of use it in a more general way and think about how many people completed a goal, which is whatever we want them to do, whether that is something money related like donating, or a different type of goal like signing up to volunteer or spending a good amount of time on your site. All of this can help you understand kind of who are your most high value visitors to your site. All right, and before we really dive into these reports, we do have a few tips that we put together as we were going through this training. So the first is there are always at least 2 ways to do everything, pretty much literally, which means that, you know, however you remember to do it is probably fine. We'll kind of show you 2 different ways to do a couple of things, but there's usually no wrong way to do it. Also, if you've gone into analytics, you've probably experienced this, but just keep clicking to get deeper into the details. Whether that's you see a table and then you see some links, just keep clicking and you'll get deeper and deeper. And pay attention to how your data is being filtered. We will show you some ways to filter your data, but it's important to keep in mind whether you've forgotten that you filtered your data, you might see some surprises if you don't pay attention to that. Also, do not worry about breaking things. It's a really great thing about Google Analytics. For the most part, you're just looking at the traffic. You're not actually doing anything to your site. So poke around, click, really don't worry. The only place you could get into trouble is the admin tab, but we won't really be in there at all today. And you know, Nina and I are both kind of involved in the support organization, so we have to promote our help resources. So when in doubt, just do go to a help center or Google it. People have put a lot of time into explaining analytics, so if you ever have any doubts, look for help under that 3-dot menu in the top right corner.
Great, so we're going to get started in our worksheet time and do a little bit of hands-on analytics work. First thing we want to make sure everyone can do is to sign into the analytics account. If you haven't signed in already, the easiest way to do that is just to navigate to analytics.google.com. And in the upper right-hand corner, you should be able to click Sign In. If you're already in Gmail or in a Google account, it will probably sign you in automatically. If you do not have any data in your analytics account and you'd like to use an account that does have data in it, you can use the official Google Analytics demo account. And if you do need to do that, you'll just do a little Google search for Google Analytics demo account. And there will be a help article in there. And halfway down that help article will be a hyperlinked phrase that just says Access Demo Account. So if you do want to pull that up at this time, feel free. Okay. So ideally, everyone is in their analytics account or in an analytics account with some data. One of the first worksheets in our handout is the KPI worksheet. That's just an acronym for a Key Performance Indicator. So this could be something as simple as sign up 10 new volunteers per month, or solicit donations of $5,000 per month, whatever your goals are. This worksheet can just help you kind of work through your general organizational goals and try to distill those into things that can actually be measured by Google Analytics. So we do recommend taking a few minutes after the webinar to fill out the KPI worksheet and kind of have that guide the way that you look at analytics and the reports that you focus on throughout kind of the rest of the worksheet.
All right, so now we're going to move into screen sharing to actually get into analytics. So bear with me for 1 second while I start sharing my screen. All right, looks like You guys can see that. All right, so we're going to start with really some basic kind of page performance metrics. If you've used analytics before, you've probably taken a look at some of these yourself. It's kind of a warm-up before we kind of dive into some of our other worksheets. So I'm going to start by just answering some of the basic questions I always want to know about a site, which are, what are the most popular pages, and, what pages are people actually spending time on? So you can answer those questions. This is the what are people doing question. So that is going to be in the behavior tab. Also, in case you are following along, we are in the reporting tab, which also FYI Analytics is going through a little bit of a UI change right as we're giving this training. So some of you might see, instead of tabs at the top, everything is on the left-hand side. But don't worry, almost everything is exactly the same. It's only kind of a difference where the admin tab is. So don't worry about that too much. So for all of us, the behavior tab is going to be down here towards the bottom, and you may need to click to expand. And so we're going to go to site content, and then we're going to go to all pages. All right, and if I scroll down, I can see a list of the pages in my site. And for your reference, we are using that Google Analytics demo account. So if you're wondering, this is the Google merchandise store where you can buy swag like YouTube t-shirts and whatnot. So get a little insight into what they're selling in the store. All right, so from this view, I can see a lot of basic metrics about my site. So for example, how many views they're getting, how many unique page views, so that is how many people are on the site. So if people viewed the site twice in one session, we'll only count it once in this view. How much time in the page, and some other basic metrics here. So if I wanted to answer the question, what are the most popular pages, I would just want to make sure that it's sorted by page views or unique page views, and just take a look at my top ones. So for example, home page is at the top. That's very common. You'll probably see that on your site as well too. And a couple other pages like the basket and signing in. So it's always good to know for yourself which pages are really driving the most traffic. You can also get a sense of how engaged people are with each page by looking at the average time on page. I'd say this is not a perfect metric, so I would not be obsessed by it, but it is a good indicator of which ones are perhaps performing a bit better or worse. For example, if you have a page with a lot of content and people are only spending a few seconds on average, well, you might think about making that page more engaging so people stay a bit longer. On the flip side, sometimes time on page is a bad thing, so if it's a very simple page and you see that people are spending minutes and minutes on it, that could be a sign that it's a bit confusing. So just pay attention to, how these metrics matter for your business. What are your goals for each page? All right, and as I mentioned, you can always dive deeper. So I'm going to dive deeper now into our home page. So for you, I would just keep in mind that the home, it might be labeled like this. It might just be a slash. It might be index. It could be labeled a lot of different things, but it's usually at the top. All right, and from this page, we see really the same metrics here as we saw on the previous page. I'm going to go to this really handy tab called Navigation Summary. And this tells me where people came from and where people went after visiting this one page I'm looking at. So for example, I can see that 65% of people going to the home page entered on this page. This means they came directly from somewhere else and landed on the home page. But quite a few people also came on previous pages, so maybe they landed on a different page and then ended up on the home page. And then if I wanted to know how many people left after viewing my home page, you can see that here. So you can see that a pretty good number of people saw the home page and left. And this doesn't tell us exactly whether people came and then directly left, but you can get a sense that a lot of people did leave after seeing this page. You can also see what pages people visited next. So you can see that YouTube products are really popular as the next step. And I would really pay attention to this and see whether it matches your nonprofit's goals. For example, if there is a particular program that you're trying to promote, or, so you want people to sign up for, I would make sure that that is prominently displayed on your homepage in a way that gets people to go there. If people are going to a lot of other pages that are less high priority, you might want to rethink your page design. Okay, and the last one here is kind of an extra bonus fun page. So if I go under behavior to behavior flow, you get a pretty cool graphic that shows the most common paths through your site. So this is really how people are flowing from the landing page where they started on, and then where they go next. This is not the best example because it says not set, but you can see, for example, a lot of people came to the home page, then they went to, let's pretend this is a t-shirts page. And then you can see, then a majority of people went to this page, and actually a lot of people left. So after whatever page this was, all this red is actually people that dropped and left your site. So it's a good way to tell how people, what are the most common things they're doing on your site. Maybe they're on your homepage, looking at a particular program, then going to, let's say, the donate page. That might be ideal. And you can also look at a couple more metrics here. I won't go into this, but there is a bit more to dive into on this page. All right, so that ends the kind of warm-up basic flow page. I'm going to pass it over to Nina, who's going to talk more about social.
All right, so we're going to demo the social worksheet part of the packet. This is a part of the worksheet that should be totally applicable to your website and to your analytics account. So if it's available to you and you want to fill it out as we go along, feel free. But again, you can also just follow along with us and you can fill it out later. We're going to practice digging into the reports, comparing data across date ranges, and adding segments to your data. So even if social isn't the most important thing to you, you can sort of repeat this pattern in any area that is interesting. We just chose social because it's automatically tagged within people's accounts, so there's usually at least some interesting information here. Okay, so I go back here, and then we do this, right? Okay, so I'm going to start with question 1, because that is a good place to start. So when you're in the account, we're going to start not from the behavior section where we were before, but from the acquisition section on the left-hand side. So when we open that up, we'll go to acquisition and then overview. Why is it not
let me restart
long? And we'll resume our sharing, and then we will be magically in the acquisition overview. Okay, great. So again, this is just the left-hand menu. Under acquisition, we are in overview. And the first question that we're asking, well, the first thing that we're actually going to do here is to set the date range correctly. So over here in the upper right-hand corner, date range is always something you want to pay attention to in analytics, because depending on what you're looking at, obviously you can expect to see very different data. So we recommend looking at days that are at least 24 hours before the current day, since that it can take up to 24 hours for analytics data to fully populate in the account. So for this particular worksheet, we're looking at the date range October 1st through October 31st. You can select this a couple different ways. You can just click on the 1st and then the 31st. Or what you can do is just click October 2016. If you click that little October 2016 heading, it will automatically select the whole month for you and make it very easy. And then you will just hit apply. So now we have a new set of data in front of us. We have the data from the most recent October. And the question we're asking here is, what percentage of traffic to your site came from social? So we'll scroll down to our acquisition table, and we can see that it looks like, well, 82% of the sessions were new, or were 82% totally from here. Let's see, here we go. So in our top channels, it shows us that 42.1% of our traffic came from social. And this is actually, in the case of the Google Merchandise Store, more than organic search, more than people who just directly visited the store, and more than any referral traffic. This may not be as big a piece of the pie for you, but it's just good to get an idea of what effect social is having on your website traffic. So we can fill that one in with 42.1%. And then if we scroll down and we click into the social link on the table, we'll get to focus, instead of on all the channels that were affecting our acquisition, now we'll just be in the social grouping. And what's nice about social, like we mentioned before, is it analytics recognizes those different social networks and it tags it accordingly. So you didn't have to set up anything special for analytics to know that people are coming from Twitter or coming from Facebook or anything like that. So the question here is, which social channel is sending the most traffic to your site? In our case, it is far and away YouTube, which is probably not a coincidence. Probably.
Pretty sure they're selling YouTube shirts from YouTube.
YouTube shirts from YouTube. I think they're running many video ads on YouTube. I think they are probably not paying for those ads since we are all the same company. So I think that YouTube is sending us a lot of traffic here at the Google Merchandise Store. But for you, it may very well be a different social network. If it is the social network that you put the most effort into, then that's great. You can see your efforts paying off. If it's sort of a surprise to you that your top social network is Reddit, then that's something to consider as well. Maybe you want to keep focusing on another social network and try to drive it up. Maybe you want to pay a little bit more attention to the one that seems to sort of be working for you without even putting a concerted effort into it. But either way, this is something to look at and something to consider. The next question in this table is, which social channel is sending you the most engaged traffic? And to measure engaged traffic, we would look to this kind of middle of the 3 bigger columns, or the middle of the 9 smaller columns. Everything under behavior here is very helpful for measuring engagement. So just as Elena mentioned earlier, the average session duration, that's a good one to look at. And if you can combine it with the pages per session and sort of a lower bounce rate, that's how we can tell, where the engaged traffic is coming from. So YouTube, I do think in our case, is being sent by some advertising, because you can see that the average session duration is actually very low compared to some of the other social networks here. And the pages per session is a little bit on the low side as well, and the bounce rate is a little bit higher. So for the Google Store, the Facebook and the Reddit social traffic is actually a little bit more engaged. It doesn't have as many raw goal completions over here, but percentage-wise, it does look pretty good. So even if you're not tracking conversions and you don't have any goal data populating in the columns to the right, the behavior columns are usually pretty good indicators of how engaged your traffic is. And in this case, it's nice to see because the conversions data just sort of backs that up. Great, and then if you are tracking conversions, The next question is just about which one is driving the most conversions. So if you do have that data populated on the right-hand side, it's just good to take note of how those efforts are paying off on the various social media channels. If you do not have that populated, we will go through some goal setup later. Good. And then just on the back of that same social worksheet, we're going to look at what social traffic looks like over time. So what we're going to do is scroll up and change our date range so that it includes a comparison data set. What we can do and what it will sort of automatically do for you is compare to the previous period. So in our case, we're looking at a month, and the kind of default comparison will be the month before. But you can also do a custom comparison here if you started a campaign sort of halfway through the month or halfway through the year and you want to compare it to a previous period, you can do that here. Date ranges and the comparisons can be really important because without some type of context, all you have is kind of just a page full of numbers. You really want to be able to add some type of context to your data to see what it really means. Some people can do this by benchmarking. There are certain industry benchmarks that people will look to see how they're performing relative to their peers. But without that information, you can still do some kind of internal benchmarking by comparing to previous months or maybe how you were doing it this time last year. Anything like that can help you figure out whether the traffic is better and more engaged or somehow less engaged. Whatever it is, it's really just good to have that comparison instead of just seeing a bunch of numbers in sort of a vacuum. So, long-winded way to talk about changing the date range, but we're just going to click Compare to Previous Period and hit Apply. When you have the date comparison on, you'll now see a blue and an orange metric across any of the graphs, and you'll see two different lines of data for any of the tables. So in this table results here, you'll see that instead of just seeing one line of YouTube data and one line of Facebook data, we now have two different date ranges that are populating for each of these social networks. When you have your date comparison on, it's good to take a look at what is changing during those dates and what is staying the same. So if there's any big changes to observe here, if you had a significant amount more traffic during one month than another, that's good to note. If you know what caused changes to your data, you can actually annotate the graph above to let yourself know, like, hey, this is when we ran a big donation drive, or hey, this is when we had a big event that drove a lot of awareness of, our issues and our nonprofit. And you can do it with this tiny, tiny, tiny little arrow here. And it's right below the graph. And if you click this tiny arrow, you can create a new annotation. And you can pick the date. You can say, yep, that was it, October 19th. And you can say that's when we had our big gala that we did so much advertising for. And then you would go ahead and hit save. I'm not going to save this because the Google Store doesn't have very many galas. But that is what you would do just so that you know kind of if you're seeing any spikes or any big dips in traffic and there was something external that affected it, you don't have to keep looking at that later or next year and say like, wow, what was that? Cool. Great. So if you observe changes in the month comparison, you can note those down here. And if you know what caused those changes, you can either note them in the graph or just on the worksheet. And then the last thing that we're going to do for the social worksheet is practice segmenting our traffic. So I'm going to scroll up back to the top. I'm also going to take our date range off because it's going to get a little too confusing, I think. So we'll just go back to looking at October. And what we're going to do now is something that you've probably seen and maybe not even realized that you've seen probably many, many, many times, but it's just this little guy, this Add Segment button. It's pretty much on every page within Analytics, but it's just kind of ghostly grayed out and it's hard to see, but this is how you add a segment to your traffic. So you can click Add Segment. And what we're going to do for the social worksheet is add the New Users segment. We'll just scroll down to that option and make sure that it's checked. And then we can hit Apply. So now we have all users showing in blue, and we have new users showing in orange. And instead of seeing our YouTube data separated by months, like we saw before, you can now see the performance separated by types of user. Right now we're just doing new users, but you can see how it would be useful to do users on a mobile device, or any type of user that can be defined in Analytics, you can add as a segment here. So once we have that applied, we're going to follow the worksheet and go down to under the acquisition section still. We'll go down to social and then network referrals. So we've got our segment applied. We're under social and then network referrals. And I'll just scroll down to this table and let it load here. And now we can actually see which channel is driving the most engaged new users versus all users. This can be helpful if you've done any kind of website redesign recently, because your new users won't really have had the experience with your old website, so they can sort of be like a nice little control group-ish. It could also include people who cleared their cookies recently, but for the most part, it'll be a pretty good indicator of new users and how they're interacting with your site. So you can just note here which social channel is sending the most engaged new users. And what we can also do here is we can click on one of the social networks on the list. You can click on any of them. And just another interesting little report here is the shared URLs. So this will actually show you, if you're not sure why all of this traffic is coming from a certain social network, where they came from, what URL was actually shared on that network. So if this was the Twitter list, this would be the actual URL that somebody included in their tweet, the actual short link. So for us, it's just a whole bunch of kind of Google Merchandise Store, probably ads that are running for the home page here. And you can click into that and see the full refer for all these YouTube ads. But really, we don't need to do that. We can just stay on this table and we can see, which URLs were actually shared on each of these networks. And if there are URLs you meant to share and you were pushing in a certain marketing effort, that's great. But it can be interesting. It could be something that you didn't realize was being shared widely, and that can be helpful too. Great. So when we have done that, we can just scroll up to the top of the page, and we can remove this segment very easily. Just click that little down arrow and we can say remove, and we'll be back to just the full report with all users.
All right, that's it for social. All right, so then now we're going to move on to our last demo section here, which is really about your goals. So I mentioned these briefly at the top, but goals are really whatever you want them to be. So whatever you consider to be a valuable action on your website, you can add as a goal. So for example, for nonprofits, common things might be donating, whether people sign up to volunteer, whether people maybe viewed a page for a program that you are especially interested in promoting. Really anything that you find, anything that you really want people to do on your site is a good way of thinking of goals. So we did include how to add a goal in the pre-work packet, but I'm going to go over it again and just make sure that everyone's got that covered. So to add a goal, this is actually in the admin section. So this is the only thing we're doing today in the admin area. And again, if you do have the new version of analytics, it'll just be on the bottom of the left-hand menu. Okay, so from here, we can go to goals. And this is the goals that are currently set up from the Google Store. But there's something missing here. I'm actually not seeing the add goal button. So if you don't see a big red button, that means that you probably do not have the right access. So you need to be, if somebody else is more of the master admin, they'll need to give you different permissions. But luckily I have a second tab over here with sites that I do have access to. So I'm going to go to goals. And now here is this big red button. Yay! Thank you, Nina's old site. Okay, so I'm going to click New Goal. And you can give it a name. So this should be something that's descriptive to you and to other people that might be viewing this. So I'm going to create one called Donated. This means they completed a donation. So this is goal slot ID, which you can pretty much ignore. It's kind of an automatic numbering system. There are a few different kinds of goals. We're going to focus on the destination one because it's a very simple one to do. And the destination one means that people just got to a particular page. So, for example, if it's about maybe a program that you want to promote, if they just got to the page that describes that program, that could be a goal. Or, for example, if you are doing something like donations, if you have a thank you page that only shows when people have donated to your site, that can be a good indicator that people have donated. So, including the thank you as your destination tells you that people donated. There's also a couple other options like duration. So maybe if people just spend, let's say 5 minutes on your site like they have here, maybe that means that, you know what, they were super engaged, they learned a lot about your nonprofit. That's, that's a good goal for us. Or, pages, similar one is pages per session. So whether people really explored your website, you can add that as a goal as well.
And you can have multiple goals set up. You may have different different things that are important for different programs that you're running. If there are things about driving awareness, then a duration goal could be really appropriate. But if it is more kind of getting direct impact and directly, signing up volunteers in the community or whatever it is, you'll probably want to stick with the destination goal.
Yep, and the last one, which we won't really get into here, is an event. So this is really powerful. So if you, for the technical person that runs your website, has added event tracking to your site, you could track things like click the donate button or click to sign up for your newsletter. Really like things are happening on the page, even if it's under the same URL. This is fairly technical. We did include at the end of this presentation a link to help about this. It's kind of a big setup process, so we're not going to go through here, but we did include some information. So keep it simple. We'll do a destination goal. We'll hit continue. Now I have a couple more options. So since it's the donation goal, all we need to do is put in our URL. But the important part is that you don't need to put in your domain, so you don't need to put in like mynonprofit.org. You just put in after the slash. So let's say it's like, thank you for donating. Probably not the most URL name, but so basically whatever comes at the end of the .org or .ca, I think you had to, sorry. And there's a couple more options here which you can basically leave off, but value, you can assign monetary values to this, which is probably not useful for most of our nonprofit use cases, but for example, if you did want to say, you know, if people donate or people volunteer, that's worth, you know, quote unquote, $100. Whereas just people spending a few minutes on the page, that's worth $20. You could use that as a like relative way to say which of your goals are more important. Probably unnecessary though, so I would just leave it off. The funnel is basically if there are particular steps that people need to take to complete the goal, you can add those previous steps so you can kind of analyze that flow. A really classic example would be something like a shopping cart. So you have to add things to your cart, then you have to add your payment information, then shipping, then confirm your order, and then you get to the end. So if you did have a clear funnel like that, you could add each of those steps and then see whether people, for example, left at the shipping, you know, and abandoned their cart, or how many people made it all the way through. I would say for the nonprofits, you guys probably have fewer use cases like that, so I would leave that off as well. You can verify this just to check. In this case, we made up this URL, so there's definitely 0% of people have done that. But if it is something that you did expect quite a few people to have done, you can verify this and just make sure that it has happened in the last 7 days. Okay, and then I'll click Save. All right, there it is. And Nina had already added a 2 minutes on site. And these are our 2 goals. Now keep in mind that goals only, they don't apply to historical data. So they like this donated one will apply from right now onwards. So if you just added a goal very recently, you won't see it show up in your metrics until people have actually done it. Okay, so that's how to add a goal. I would recommend mostly keeping it simple, maybe adding a few more thank you pages if you want to really track those well. And so now we'll talk about what you can do once you do have goals set up. Okay, so I'm back in the Google Merchandise Store, where they do have some goals here. They are an e-commerce site, so theirs are a little bit different in that they actually do have monetary values, but it will still learn from this one. Okay, so let's go to the main place we can see information about your goals. That is under the conversions area. So you see the word conversion, stay with the word goal. So we go to overview, and we can see some basic metrics like how many people completed each of our goals. So in this example, they have a few different goal locations that they look for, and they can see how many people did each one. And I believe this percent is out of the total sessions, how many people completed a goal. So you can see your goal conversion rate, which, you know, ideally is high as possible. So the more people that come to your site and do something that's of value to you, the higher the goal conversion rate. And yeah, the number of goal completions is a basic metric. So when you look at this for yourself after you have data, just keep in mind, is this, you know, higher or lower than you expected? Did you expect more people to have gone to these pages or done these actions? If not, you may want to think about how you can promote those better on your website. All right, and you aren't limited to seeing the goal information in this conversions area. You can see it in many pages throughout analytics. So now we're going to go back to our behavior tab to see, you know, which landing pages led people to convert the most. So I'm going to scroll back up to too far, behavior, and then site content and landing pages. And landing pages are the first page people land on when they visit your site. So here we can see a few of our landing pages. And then towards the right, we can see conversions. Right now there's a filter on this for e-commerce, but you could choose a particular goal or just do all of them. So that's an example of when I talked about paying attention to your filtering. If I didn't notice that, I might have been kind of confused about, oh, I thought there should be more conversions, but it was only filtering it to a smaller set. Okay, so now if I want to see which landing page led to the most conversions, I can sort this by how many people completed a goal. And I can see that actually the home page did the most in terms of the raw number. But I might also want to look at the rate. So out of the number of people that landed on this page, how many people converted? Not quite sure how these percentages work with these huge numbers, but
I think they converted 4 times.
they converted 4 times, yeah.
They have 4 goal completion, so it's possible that there's a purchasing goal and there's also like a time on site goal, something like that.
Anyway, if I go back to here, I can always look at my top pages and see. Okay, looks like this Google redesign men's t-shirts page actually did really well. Like 22% of those people converted to one of our goals. All right, and so I just looked at this as kind of a column in this view, but you can actually see all of analytics using the same segments that we used before. And segments are really as Nina showed you before, they're really kind of a key analytics skill. So if you didn't learn anything from this training, hopefully you did, but adding segments is really a core skill. It's really powerful. We've shown pretty basic examples, but you can really do anything you want to compare 2 different things. You can create ones that are completely custom and use a lot of the pre-built system ones. So in this case, we are going to keep using the system ones. So right now we're going to compare converters with non-converters. So people that did complete one of our goals with people who didn't. So converters is going to be up here. I'm going to uncheck all users and do converters. Then I'm going to add a second segment for people that did not convert. So now this is non-converters. Okay, now everything I see in analytics, so these segments really filter everything in analytics. So any report that I look at now, I will see the difference between converters and non-converters. This is really valuable to see what the differences are. Do they go to different pages? Do they spend different amounts of time on the page? Do they come from different social channels? To really help you focus on getting those non-converters to be more like people that did convert. So, for example, I'm going to look at, if I can click around, you can even see things like the audience. So are there differences between the people who converted and not converted? Are they on different devices? Are they mobile, desktop? Are they different languages? Really everything you can compare what the difference is. So in the worksheet we have here, just see if you can find any big differences. Looks like on this site, converters are a lot more likely to speak English. So maybe that could point to, maybe the way that they've implemented things for other languages is not as strong as it is for English. All right, so we only have a few minutes left, but we did complete the goals section. So we are just going to switch over to the last few minutes of our presentation. Woohoo! And I do see one quick question from the chat. We can only sometimes see it, but converters are anyone that's completed any of your goals. So whether it's something like the time on page or visited a particular URL, all of those are considered converters. But you might not see any converters if, one, your goal is too recent. So if you recently set it up and just nobody's done it, or you might have goals that actually are pretty rare for people to do. Like, you don't get donates. Yeah, okay, great. Looks like in the chat we see just set this goals up. So I'd wait, a few days, a week, however long it takes, and then you'll start seeing those people show up.
Yeah, and also just make sure that you're only looking at a date range in which you did have the goals set up. So everything we've been doing is from a couple months ago. So if you were following along and you just set the goals up, it's probably not going to be there yet. But yeah, we have to tell analytics what a converter is for us. It won't have useful data there if you haven't done that yet. Cool. Okay. So just a really quick lightning round, a few features that we're not going to dig into, but we want to let you know, give you a little homework, a couple things to impress your coworkers with once you get back to the office. So the first one is tracking social win.
Yeah, so a lot of you probably might even be in charge of running your social campaigns. So although you can't easily see in analytics, where people came from, it came from Facebook, etc. You might want to know more particular, like which post they came from or which campaign you were running. So the way you can do that is instead of using kind of a default link to your site, you can create custom links that have these kind of extra URL parameters tagged in. So you can say, for example, this add the words like holiday donations from Facebook, XYZ post into a URL, and then that'll funnel into analytics, and then you can see exactly where people came from. So left a couple help in the page where you can build these links.
Cool. And you can use those for email marketing campaigns as well. The second thing is just event tracking. We touched on this a little bit earlier. If you have something important within a page on the site, but it's not a separate unique page that people would only be able to get to once they converted, you could still try to set up event tracking for something like click to email this person, click to sign up for the newsletter, things like that. So there's a little help link there on setting that up, but again, it is a little more complex. We would recommend starting with just the basic goal setup. This one, the User Explorer, is a very exciting report where you can use fully anonymized data to actually kind of follow along a particular visitor to your site and see what they did and what pages they visited and exactly how their visit to your site went. It is, you probably have to dig into a few people to kind of get any insights in there, but it is kind of a nice tool and it's pretty recent. And it is fully anonymous, so it just assigns a client ID, and then you can kind of follow along with what their visit was like when they were on your site. And this one is custom dashboards. We sort of, we didn't really go through this today, but basically any report that you have seen that you think is useful and you'd like to check on a regular basis, you can add it to your dashboard. And you can create dashboards. It should be in the left-hand menu, kind of near the top.
Near the top, yeah.
And then you can create dashboards that have certain tables in them or certain graphs in them that you found to be very useful. And that might be a little bit easier to check on a day-to-day basis than digging into a few reports. And you can also set those up to email to you daily, weekly, monthly, whatever it is. If you need reports to help you generate something for your board of directors or for another group, you could always get these emailed to you regularly instead of having to dig into the account. And then the last one, also sort of helpful for any kind of board of directors or any kind of impressive presentations that you need to create. There is a free tool called the Data Studio. You can access it at the link here. And once you've just tied the accounts together, like once it recognizes that you're using Data Studio with the same account that you use Google Analytics, you can pull in any of your data from Google Analytics and make really, really nice looking reports in a very few minutes. It really makes it easy. It makes it look like you put a ton of time and effort into it. It's incredible. And we won't tell anyone that you're using it. We won't break your secret. Okay, great. And I think that's everything that we have for today. Hopefully it was a good amount of information and not too much information. Everything that we went through, you should be able to kind of go through on your own and it should all make sense. We tried to be pretty transparent with everything. But feel free to use, the Analytics Help Center and any other resources that you can find online. So thank you so much to the Neil Squire Society for setting up this webinar. And thank you so much for showing up this morning. We were really happy to be able to interact with you via a webinar.
Thank you very much, Alana and Mima there. Does anybody have any questions? I saw one question in the chat room earlier on that sort of slipped through. It was a fairly detailed one, so I don't know if this is one you'll be able to answer straight away, but there's one that was missing there. But see, there will be a recording of the webinar available. I'll send out the link after today's session. Okay, it looks like there's one sort of detailed question here. I don't know if you'll be able to answer or not, but the person has asked the question that under the behavior/site content with the list of your web pages, we have an unknown page in the top 10 called /share button.2. Is this a spam cookie, or if so, what can you do to prevent it? To track the web pages, have inserted the Google Analytics code at the top of each page. Do you know the answer to that?
Yes, so it's a pretty annoying spam technique where they make it look as if their spam website is one of your top referring sites, and then when you click on it to see like, what is this? That's actually how they get all their traffic, from everybody clicking on it in their actual analytics reports. Yes, there are many actually third-party resources that I found around this that are helpful. I'd recommend just Googling it. Even Googling that URL will bring up a lot of resources created by people in the analytics industry who are kind of trying to combat this kind of stuff. I definitely understand it's frustrating to see kind of fake data like that. It's basically just a spammer that's taking advantage of just knowing how analytics sees data, and it's presenting its site in a way that analytics, you know, it doesn't know it's a spam site. It's trying to just do its job, and it's getting tricked by this spam guy, or woman. But definitely Google it. You need to set up a filter to recognize kind of the hosts that you think are valid, and to not recognize any other hosts beyond it. It is sort of a sophisticated thing to do, but there are instructions online. I'd probably recommend doing it in a different view, so keeping your raw data view the same, but creating a new view where you make these changes, because it will probably affect the raw data coming in, and if you do it incorrectly, you might lose some of that. So if you are in the admin tab, there is a part where you can create a new view. So here's a line of view right here. It's not letting you do it because we're in the Google Store.
Yeah.
But under the view drop down right there where it says like one master view, that's where it would generally let you create a new one. So I would create a new one before making any drastic changes to try to get rid of the share buttons, because it's definitely annoying to have the share buttons data in there, but it would probably be worse to lose all your data in an attempt to get rid of them.
Okay, does that answer your question, Elle, who asked the question? Okay, good. Kate has asked the question, I have traffic coming in from Reddit but have no idea what it is. Is there a way to find out where that is coming from specifically?
Are the share URLs showing anything useful there? Because it should, once we're from the shared URLs page, if you dig into one of those, it should actually show which part of, yeah, like click on the first one. Okay, yeah, so you should be able to see the actual Reddit, the full refer links going in there. It looks like, for example, a lot of the Google ones are coming from something related, like a Chrome sticker or Project Fi, things like that. But it also sort of looks like some are coming from a gopher, something related to a gopher toy. But so the shared URLs report that we looked at before, and it's also in the worksheet packet. If you click into one of the URLs you shared, it will then go one step further and show the pages within Reddit that had it on there.
Okay, so it's the Reddit's the equivalent of maybe posting a link on Facebook or something like that, isn't it?
It's sort of just a whole bunch of user forums. Yeah.
Okay. Does that
not
answer your
necessarily bad traffic, because there are like really specific forums and people who are really dedicated to like various causes and various things are definitely all over Reddit. But to see the specific pages, yeah. Okay, cool.
Okay, good. Does anybody have any more questions at all? I think that's us now. Okay, well, thank you very much for attending today, and thank you very much to Ilana and Nina for taking part. Hopefully everything should sink in eventually. What we'll do is we'll send you a link to the recording after it's finished, and if you do have any sort of other questions or anything like that, maybe we can try and answer them, but we'll see how things go from there. Okay, thank you very much for turning up.
Thanks for hosting us.
Yeah, thank you.
Thank you.